This is Footy Talk, your place for the latest news, interviews and analysis from the world of AFL. It is round 24. It's the final week of the home and away season. It is a Tuesday. I'm joined by Nick Riewoldt, looking sharp as always. Hello, Roo. It's been a long year over here. I can't believe we still get home and away footy, but finally it's coming to an end and we're almost getting there. We almost know what the 8 and the top 4, I think, is set. The top 8 is only one game really that can decide that. It's getting very close. What have you made of it all?
Oh, I mean, it's been a phenomenal season. I mean, we all know. I'm not saying anything that anyone would disagree with there, and just keeping up with the results. It's just been a must do on a weekly basis, just to think about all the permeations of the 8 and what's going to happen. So nice to be getting a little bit of clarity, Joey, at the end of the season. I know we heard a few weeks ago, obviously a vested interest in St Kilda, that they were looking to play the Grinch role in the run to the finals, and they've certainly done that. But yes, still storylines everywhere. I feel like usually we get to this time of the year, and a lot of the clubs we're kind of in shutdown mode and forgetting about them. But I mean, Adelaide are a big talking point out of the weekend. Collingwood, very unlikely, but they're still a big talking point.
Essendon,
and
always.
Essendon are a big talking point. But the biggest one of all, Joey, and they're not going to play finals, but I think they are a huge story at the moment, and that's the Melbourne Footy Club with everything that's going on there and the talk around Christian Petracca. Yeah,
let's get into that. So we'll go with the thought of the week, and we'll go with the Melbourne Footy Club. What have you made of it all from afar? Where do you want to take it? What's been your overriding thoughts hearing about the Christian Petracca scenario?
I mean, I'm bewildered, totally bewildered by the situation, and really without hearing from Christian himself as to the situation and how he feels and how this has come about is really the perplexing one, because clear that he's been frustrated, clear that he's had some challenges throughout this period of injury and spent some time away from the club, and then how that has then really morphed into frustration and resentment with the club, to the point that someone within his camp is actually out there sort of voicing his displeasure. I mean, that's a big thing. You can feel it and you can think it and you can have conversations in your inner sanctum, but it rarely gets out the way it's gotten out unless you want it to get out. And that's the really fascinating part is to how things have become so bad that there's now talk about him wanting to leave and actually being prepared to make that happen.
So I'll just chat about what I feel like has happened with Christian Petracca in a moment. But do you think then this has been a bit of a market, or not, a PR move by his camp to just build some momentum publicly to sort of just test the waters? A bit like what we always say about the AFL. They sort of throw something out into the media to see what the reaction is, to then see if they go ahead with the decision. Are you sort of thinking that Melbourne have done this a little bit to build a bit of traction, to then give them a bit of leverage if they do go to the club and ask for a trade? Is that sort of where you're thinking this is headed? Or how it's got to this point?
Yeah, with this sort of stuff, it doesn't get out unless someone wants it to get out. So whether that's a...
Or is there no secrets anymore in footy? Or is there no secrets? If he was not happy
But I think it depends on how wide you voice that. So if Christian's not happy, and again we're this is pure speculation, but if he's not happy, depending on how far and wide you go with voicing that frustration, if you're gonna get that out there amongst people outside your inner sanctum, you know it's going to get out there. But the one for me is the Melbourne Football Club and where they sit in all of this, because if they've got a player that's I don't think there's anyone with greater value in the game. We've spoken a lot over the last few years about the potential for a Melbourne dynasty. I think we probably all agree that ship sailed. Like, can you see them being a dynasty with the way it's all set up at the moment? Can they get back to those heights?
Look, I don't rule out them next year being a top 4, top 6 team. I actually can see that and can see it happening. But again, it's going to revolve around Christian Petracca being there. And they need to sit down and... you know what I was thinking when I was coming in? And I didn't know you were going to go down the Melbourne path. I was thinking they need to have a good old-fashioned over the off-season route for pre-season. They need to go on an overseas training camp and just get together again, like we did all those years ago. We went to London
Yeah.
and we went, go and spend 2 weeks in a training camp overseas as a club and just get back together, because if Clayton Oliver comes back next year fully fit, I'm not jumping off the Clayton Oliver bandwagon like he's going to fall off a cliff as a player. He's had a horrible year. We know about his pre-season and we know about his injuries that he's carried all season. If he got fit next year, he is still a top 10 midfielder in the competition. Petracca, if he can fall back in love, and we know really that football clubs are like families. You do go through times where you get angry with them and you fall out of love and you have rifts, but at the end of the day, you still love the club. And it feels to me with Christian Petracca, what's happened is, off the back of his injury, where he's probably felt like it got close to, I think he's almost sort of said close to death, and it was a really traumatic experience. I think what's happened is, after that injury, the club has moved on. They've continued to play games of footy, and as you know, it's a lonely place in rehab. And I think he's had a moment where he's gone, hang on a minute, where's the attention on me? Where's the love for me? Everyone seems to have moved on. I'm in Noosa, traumatised by my experience, and I'm not getting enough love from the footy club. And I reckon that's where it stemmed from. Reading between the lines now and hearing what's come out, I think it's been a bit of, hey, hang on a minute, I need more. And I think maybe now the club have realised that. You know how that happens, Rooey? When you're injured.
No, mate, I was just going to say, it's a great observation, and I felt something pretty similar a couple of times throughout my career. 2005 when I busted my collarbone, and then the team was winning, they were doing it without you. And you're right, football clubs move on. It's lonely. I think it's a great call. I don't think it's something that he would admit to, but that can happen. Your voice, you don't feel like you've got as strong a voice when you're not actually out there on the field contributing to the team. So there might be a little bit of that. Where I was, and I like your approach. Get away as a group. Let's see if we can't go again. Let's see if we can't galvanise around this and be back up there contending. But at the same time, if they feel like they've got a player that is really motivated to get out, they've got question marks on Clayton Oliver and his ability to come back and to reach those heights again, and an honest assessment internally that, I just don't think we've got it, you could get the biggest bounty we've ever seen for a player.
Yeah.
We're talking, Collingwood are the club that have been bandied about. I don't see how that happens because they don't have the draft capital, but it was 3 first-rounders for Jeremy Cameron. If it was Collingwood, 3 first-rounders and Isaac Quainer, would you think about it if you were the Ds and you can potentially reload again for that next dynasty in 3 to 5 years' time? He has more capital than any player in the history of the game that's been touted as a potential trade target.
Yeah. No,
so you could bring in an all-time bounty and change the fortunes of the club again. I mean, you've already got a premiership in your back pocket with this crew. I think you'd have to entertain it, depending on his level of motivation and how you assessed yourselves internally and what the next, if we maintain the status quo, what the next 2 to 3 years look like.
Yeah, no, it all makes sense, Roo, and I can see your point. I'll look at it the other way now. I think teams that have been at the top are now really realising it's so hard to be a contender that once you're there, you've got to stay there. Like Collingwood again, have gone and got Schultz and they want to stay up again. Geelong have been doing it. I think Melbourne go, righto, we get Oliver fit, we get Petracca back falling in love with the place and give him the love. We've got Viney and Gawn are going to re-sign. We've got a bunch of young kids that have all come through pretty well. I just trust their leaders. Like if May and Lever can really sort of roll the sleeves up and go, right, let's have one more crack at it. They could be a top 4, top 6 team next year and be a contender. But you're right. On the flip side, they could maybe let both Oliver and Petracca go and get like what Richmond are going to do and get 3, 4, 5 first-round draft picks and set themselves up for the next phase. But plenty for them to discuss. But we'll move on because there has been plenty of other footy. Rooey, I want to ask you about Sam Darcy. It was probably the performance of the weekend from the youngster to come out. He'd been close to ripping a game to shreds. He kicked 1 goal, 5 the week before against Adelaide. He looked like he was. And then to come out in his 28th game and kick 7 goals. You kicked 6 in your 28th game. I remember you came through it as a youngster, as a key forward. What has impressed you about Sam Darcy? And the second part to that, is he capable this year of ripping a final series apart, or is he too young?
Oh no, he could absolutely rip it apart. I mean, if you can do it once, you can recreate it and you can do it again. And I think particularly given the setup that he's got at the Bulldogs, where he's not being forced to play that role where he's not going to get the best defender every week, and he's probably not going to get the second best defender every week. They're going to go to Norton and Ugle-Hagan. So, yeah, but as a ruck forward, I think there's an advantage in that you can kind of almost drift forward at times and, float into the side of packs on an undersized opponent, a ruckman trailing in. He's so mobile for a big man. He's absolutely capable. And so, I don't necessarily back him to just go and do that, but as an X factor, as a player that, you got to prepare for now, I think what it does is it creates a little more awareness in opponents' heads that you can't just default to getting in the hole in front of Ugle-Hagan or getting in the hole in front of Norton or whoever else it is up there. Like it is a legitimate threat for other teams to actually have to prepare for. And I just love seeing young key forwards do it. I remember the Adelaide game where it was really the arrival of Buddy Franklin.
Kick 7 as in 2007 as a youngster.
At Marvel Stadium. So look, he's got that sort of potential written all over him.
Yeah, he certainly does. And the Dogs are one of the informed teams of the competition, but amazingly, they have to beat the GWS Giants. Otherwise, they're at risk of missing the finals altogether. Yeah. If Fremantle then beat Port Adelaide at home, that's incredible. Or it sets up a final that we'll touch on, which will probably be the Bulldogs v the Hawks, which will be an amazing game in Melbourne. It's shaping that way. Yeah.
Have you almost got a little bit more confidence in the teams 5 to 8 than you do in the teams 1 to 4 at the moment?
They're in better form. Yeah, I believe that the two most informed sides, of two of the three, Bulldogs, Hawthorn, and the Giants. And the Bulldogs and Hawthorn are outside the 8, outside the top 4. Even Brisbane, up until they've blown their chance, the last couple of weeks have been in form. I do, but then I always think, and go at the logical side, the odds are stacked in the teams in the top 4. Their favour. You get a double chance, home finals. It is going to be hard for a team. We've seen it time and time again to do it from outside the top 4, but it is shaping that way. Hey, just some other news. There was breaking news last night. I think Johnny Ralph from the Herald Sun about Shea Bolton. It looks like he has requested or will explore his opportunities to head back to Perth. Fremantle probably in the box seat with their draft picks as well as Liam Baker, Dan Rioli, Jack Graham. So that goes to your point about maybe what Melbourne will look at thinking about doing. Richmond is certainly in the box seat to do that, which you probably agree is a right idea coming in with Tasmania a few years away.
Blow it up. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're a Richmond fan, you've had a pretty good go. You've been spoilt. Hard to know that you are going to spend some time at the bottom. Because that's, does take a bit of time to get back there. But, yeah, I don't think they have a choice, really, at this point, Joey. Baker, we know, he's a free agent, so you've got no control there. And he's a guy that I think has been a real cultural driver. Have Bolton and Rioli been leaders and cultural drivers of that group? I'm not sure they have to the level of some of the other guys we've seen. So... Look, I think the opportunity again to bring in a massive haul of picks, cast your mind back to the Martin, Cochin, Riewoldt, those drafts back sort of 2000 and Rance 8, 9, 10 around that sort of time frame. Maybe this is that moment again. Yep. And if you knew you were going to put up with 5 to 10 years of pain, but you're going to get that run that they had, well, then you'd sign up for that every day.
Yeah. Spot on. And just lastly, Graham Wright has left Collingwood. He is one of the great football administrators, was a great player at the Pies, doing some great things with their list management. I wonder whether Tassie Rooey will come knocking for Graham Wright. He is a Tasmanian, and he would be someone that the AFL or I think Tassie would try and chase and help start to build the list profile for the Tassie team in years to come. Hey, we'll take a break. We want to get into real talk, shit talk. If you do have a question for us, make sure you hit us up on Instagram at footytalk_pod or on TikTok at Footy Talk Pod. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to Footy Talk. If you do have a question for us, make sure you jump on Instagram and hit us up. I'm here with Nick Riewoldt. We're going to get into real talk, shit talk, some of the comments and opinions that have been making the news the last 48 hours, and we have our take on it. The first one for you, Rooey, Dan Houston tonight goes to the tribunal after that big bump on Isaac Rankin. I want to get your take. The question to you, he deserves 5 weeks. Real talk or shit talk?
It's 5 or 0.
5 or 0? How do you see him getting 0?
Well, I can see the only way he gets 0 is if his legal defence is able to argue that he didn't make the contact with the head, that it was the ground. But we know if you choose to bump, then you essentially forfeit all rights. But that's his only chance, is that they argue that, well, it was a legal bump. He didn't get him high, which is, I think, where the umpire has an out. In all this criticism that has come for the umpires around, well, how can it be a 5-week incident and the umpire? Well, he didn't get him high.
Yeah.
Did he?
It is fascinating that there was no
He didn't get him high.
There was no illegal contact or free kick. Yeah.
No, exactly. So the umpire, well, I think the umpires did the right thing in that situation.
Yeah.
It was the ground that knocked him out, or at least that's how it appears.
Yep.
So, look, yeah, it was he's lucky he didn't get him high with that action. So I can see him getting 5, and there's a slight chance that they find some sort of loophole and he gets off. And
wow,
watch
imagine if he gets off,
lose their minds.
Oh, imagine that.
Wouldn't that be a story?
Well, it's the sort of year we've had.
Yeah, seriously.
Yes.
Hey, Joey, the Bombers, they should get rid of Jake Stringer. Real or shit talk?
Nah,
There's
that's
been a lot
shit.
of noise about it.
That's shit talk. Jake Stringer is the poster boy and the scapegoat for a lot of Essendon's problems, but I don't see him as the problem. He's one of their match winners. Like, he's a bloke that kicks 40 goals. Yes, I know he's inconsistent, but so are a lot of the match-winning forward-type players. There are 10, 12 other players I would look to trade before Jake Stringer. These other guys that are all nice players, but they haven't really helped the team win either. And you can start from the back line and finish in the forward line, and you can reel off the names. I won't do it because it's unfair. But no, not Jake Stringer. I know there's a bit of haggling over 1 year and 2 years. Ideally, Essendon want to give him 1 and make him work for his next year, and he rightly probably wants 2. But I just think sometimes he's a bit of a scapegoat for the Bombers, but there are other issues at play. Some of them just aren't consistent enough as a club, and there may be another one that have a big off-season to work on some things, Roo. Hey, one back for you. A lot of talk at the moment about players wanting trades in contract. Players have too much power these days in the AFL.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yep.
I think that's real talk. And we're seeing it play out. Like, let's use Richmond as that example. Clubs have list management committees. They have there's salary cap planning, all of that sort of stuff. And when you sign a player to a 4-year deal, you expect the player to see out his 4-year deal. So when they come and say, I want to go home, I want to go back to Perth, or whatever it looks like, then all of that planning goes out the window. And players who potentially could have got paid more or stayed at the club 2 years earlier, they were impacted. So if we're going to have that situation where players are going to go to clubs and in contract want to move, that's okay as long as the clubs have the ability to move players on when they don't want to move. So I think a situation, and this is true for sports all over the world, is you play where you're sent, just like you play where you're drafted. If a club wants to trade a player because it's better for the football club, and you want to play AFL football, then you play where you're traded. Your contract's honoured, but you play where you're traded too. So I think it's skewed a little bit too far in the players' favour at the moment. I think it'd be great for the game if we could see a lot more movement and the clubs take a little bit of that power back. I think and you open up those trade windows so you can do it in season, and clubs can, they can go for a premiership when they're in contention and trade players and bring players in. I think it'd be good for the game.
Yeah, I'm not as strong as that. I think if a club wants to trade a player that is in contract, they make that happen anyway. And an example might be someone like a Jack Lukosius. You just make it clear to a player, you're not really in our plans. Look, it might be in your best interest to explore your options. The clubs do that all the time. So they can still...
the player always dictates where they end up, Joey.
Yes,
and
do.
Quite
that is
often,
the power.
the clubs don't get the best deal for the club.
Yeah.
The club gets a deal done. But if Fremantle are prepared to offer 3 first-round draft picks for Bolton, and West Coast are only offering 1, but Bolton wants to go to West Coast, he'll end up at West Coast.
Yeah.
But Richmond should have the power to be able to trade him wherever they want.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. If a player wants to leave, okay, but he doesn't get to just nominate solely that club and say, this is the only team I'm going to. No, bad luck. We'll get the best deal for you. Yeah. I agree. Hey, finally, we're just going to finish with the race for the 8 because There are three teams that are vulnerable: Hawthorn, the Western Bulldogs, and Carlton. I'll ask you first, because if one of them lose and Fremantle beat Port Adelaide, Freo are in. Which of the three, if any, do you think will lose this last round? Will Hawthorn lose to North Melbourne in Tassie?
No.
So they're in. Will the Bulldogs lose to the Giants in Ballarat on Sunday?
50-50. 50-50.
Will St Kilda knock over Carlton on Sunday afternoon and leave the Blues vulnerable to miss the 8 if Fremantle win the game after? Can St Kilda do it?
I think it's a 50-50 as well. I mean, we saw them knock off the Cats. They've sort of been the giant killers of late, the Saints. They're in decent form, and we know Carlton have got a lot of injuries. So I think both of those games, the Bulldogs game and the Carlton game, I think they're 50-50s.
Yeah, that is that. And then Fremantle fans will be watching those games, hoping one of them lose. If they don't all three win, then the final game, Fremantle are out. It makes no difference. And it'll be only Port Adelaide fighting for second spot on the ladder. It's going to be a massive final round, Rooey. Can't wait to chat to you again next Tuesday to see how the top 8 and the finals shape up in week 1. Always nice to see you. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy your Tuesday.
See you guys.
Cheers for watching Footy Talk. New episodes with Rooey and I every Tuesday.